Thanks along tonight. My name is Rob Waddell. We run Grand Ridge Propagation Nursery. We've been operating about 15 years, 16, maybe 20 now, from a place called Seaview, which is between Waddell and Curramborough, just on the other side of the ranges there. This season we're growing about 150,000 plants, thereabouts, give or take, in tubes and in the hyco trays. So the tubes are the square ones, the hycos are the little round cells for mass production type jobs. And we've also got about half a dozen beehives, so I've started up being a hobby beekeeper in the last couple of years as well. Haven't got to the extraction stage yet. We're actually feeding some of our bees at home, but hoping for honey one day. That'd be good. Now, we've got involved with the Leptospermam side of things a couple of years ago when a chap up in East Gippsland suggested we grow a few plants for him. And we had absolutely no idea what we're doing, so we just grew a few plants and off we went. Then we found out about the testing regime and the scientific background through the University of Sunshine Coast and the Honey Lab. Now they've been running for about 4 years now through that process. We've been working with them for 2 years now, and that's involved either, we don't send honey up, but you can send honey samples up if you've got lepto honey, and they can analyse it for DHA levels. Also the MGO down the track. And the side that we're interested in is the nectar testing. So when you've got the tiny little leptospermam flowers, you can generally see the nectar on the disco flower. We rinse those flowers off with a little bit of distilled water, and we do that to about 10 flowers and then repeat twice. And we send up these little vials which get analysed and comes back with a DHA number. Now DHA is only in the nectar, and it's the precursor to having the methyl glyoxal in the honey. So DHA stands for dihydroxyacetone. It's a big long word. Without any DHA in the nectar, you're not going to get any methyl glyoxal in the honey. Now, the reason that Manuka has become so well known, I suppose, and so expensive is because it's got some pretty strong antibacterial properties. So about 10 years ago, there was a scientist mucking around in the lab in New Zealand, and he had some golden staph on a petri dish, and well, it's starting to work, that's hopeful. And he was trying to figure out a way that they can kill golden staph, because what's happening in hospitals now in wounds and the like is golden staph is becoming resistant to all the antibiotics we're using in medicine. If you only use a single mode approach of one antibiotic over and over and over again, eventually the bacteria breed that are left behind breed up and become resistant to that bacteria. So this clever chap was going back to, I suppose, time immemorial, and decided to put some honey on one of these golden staph petri dishes, and it happened to be leptospermam honey from New Zealand, so it was Manuka one, that's the only one they've got, and they killed it. So, yeah, where were we? So this guy dropped some leptospermam honey from New Zealand on the golden staph petri dish, and it killed the stuff. And then after a bit more experimentation, he found that different levels of different regions of the honey killed the golden staph over a bigger area. So stronger honey had more of an effect on killing the golden staph than other ones. Eventually they narrowed it down through lots of chemistry and testing to an ingredient in the leptospermam honey. It's only found in leptospermams and not any other species, and that was the methyl glyoxal in the honey. So that was a bit of a light bulb moment for the scientists. Then they managed to trace it back through some further research to find out that the precursor in the nectar was actually the DHA, the dihydroxyacetone. I've got no idea how they did it, but yeah, it's a pretty amazing sort of technology that's worked. Testing in this regards at the moment. I'm not sure why more aren't. Lots of people are growing Manuka and different tea trees, but there's only 4 in the whole country that are actually going to the process of analysing the nectar and trying to figure out which ones are good ones and which ones are bad ones, because there's no way of looking at a plant and telling which one's good and which one's not. Okay, so where are you? That one? Yep, I think I've covered that one, except one little point in there. New Zealand's got one species of leptospermam, that's Leptospermam scaparium. It actually drifted over from Australia. It came from Tasmania originally, and somehow or other, several 100,000 years ago, it ended up in New Zealand. It found an ecological niche. I think the islanders over there had a burning regime similar to the Aborigines. Tea tree really likes being burnt, and it sheds its seeds and all that kind of stuff. So it took off and found an ecological niche. So therefore they've got Leptospermam all over the country, and it's courtesy of Tasmania, so thanks to Tasmania. Australia's got 83 species, they're not all active. Okay, so not every species has got DHA in it, and I'll touch on that one in a sec. I'll do one other thing, that's the little photo there. That's $60 at Tullamarine for 250 grams of honey. That's going to export, most of that ends up in Asia. Yeah, no, so quarter of a kilo, $60.
I saw $250 in Auckland Airport 2 weeks ago.
Even better. Tullamarine's too cheap. Okay, so there's those couple of words. You'll get tested on spelling later on. So DHA is found in the nectar. It's converted to MgO in the honey. It takes about 18 months, 12 months for the DHA to totally converted over to the MgO. So it doesn't happen straight away. And methylglycol is the one that's got the antibacterial properties. Okay, so here's a little converter that Simon has developed up in the Sunshine Coast. So you might see on some various labels with Manuka honey on it. I think the one before was 10 plus or something like that. That's actually a relation to the amount that the honey kills the bacteria on the petri dish. The MgO numbers are much clearer and much more scientific. UMF is a New Zealand trademark. We can't use that in Australia. And the UMF Association in New Zealand has actually taken out the trademark on the name Manuka honey. So that's where that's all resulted from. You might have heard about that in the press. And MPA basically stands for non-peroxide activity. So that's virtually everyone else except for the UMF people can use the MPA. The UMF people in New Zealand can only use that one. So the MPA levels, we're looking at sort of 80 is about 5 plus, down to 1200 to 25 plus. Medicinal honey kicks in at about 400 MgO, thereabouts. Okay. Right, so why do we want to plant these things? New Zealand and Australia can't meet demand. There's a lot of supply issues in relation to the amount of honey that's being consumed, and that's why it's selling for $250 in Auckland Airport and not $10 a kilo like every other bit of honey. Australia is tapping into this market as well, but unfortunately, unless you live in sort of northern New South Wales, southern Queensland, there's no real dense populations of active leptos in this area. There's little pockets, but not big, hundreds and hundreds of acres of it. As time goes on, and what's happening in New Zealand at the moment, is those wild sites, so the bush stuff, are going to get more and more hives on them as everyone tries to cash in on the returns that are available. So it's like, as you know, if you've got too many hives in one spot, the bees start hunting for other sources, or they go hungry, one or the other, maybe both. You can't extract more nectar than what's available. So it's a finite resource is what's available in the wild, and that includes in Australia. Now, the other side of it is that when we're doing our nectar testing, we go into a patch, so there's 10 plants in this room, and we test them all. There's probably going to be maybe one, if we're lucky, that's a really, really high tester. So we're going to breed from those plants because the DHA is actually inherited down through the progeny of the plant. So if you've got a high testing parent, you also need a high testing progeny. That's why you get little hotspots in Australia where there's high activity. So in a wild setting, the bees are going to go and forage off all those trees, plus whatever else is available. There might be lots of other things available which will dilute the nectar as well. In a plantation setup, we're only looking to identify those handful of individual plants. And if I'll just grab this for a sec. I'll let that. Here's one we prepared earlier. So that little plant just looks like any other plant, and to me it looked like any other plant as well, except we nectar tested him. So that's one of the Manuka plants we got from, we actually got the seed from New Zealand last season, and about 40 of them or so flowered. That one came up with a DHA level of about 15,000. On Simon's little converter, that worked out to about 2,000 MgO. So really, really, really high. There's other ones that were 500 DHA, and that looked exactly the same. So that's the kind of plant that we're looking to breed with, to keep upping and upping and upping the levels of DHA in plants, and we can propagate that from cuttings. The seed will be a higher testing plant as well. That one's not for sale, by the way. Also, if you've got a plantation, you've got, say, a hectare planted out, a couple of hectares, whatever you're going to do, there's less chance of nectar contamination, especially if you find what's called a nectar gap. So at the moment, probably everyone's pretty much got a nectar gap right at the moment because there's not much going on. If you were to target a Leptospermam species and plant it to flower now, when there's virtually zip out in the paddocks, the bees are just going to forage almost exclusively on the leptos, rather than going off to the gum tree over there and a bit of capeweed and everything else that's floating around. So the more nectar that comes in from other sources into the hive, the more the honey is going to be diluted, and the DHA levels, a bit like adding water to cordial, I suppose, it just gradually gets lower and lower and lower. So you want to find the species that suits your little nectar gap in your particular site. I touched on the last one. There's no sign of this stopping anytime soon. Horse people have been mucking around with Manuka honey for years. The market seems to be quite substantial. There's also a couple of eucalypt honeys. Jarrah is the most common, most well-known one. It's got really, really high peroxide levels, and that acts in the same way as the MGO. So, you know, it's a pretty big market. Yep.
Got a question. You said if you get the plant to flower now, can you breed or can you propagate plants to and predetermine the flowering time?
I'll get to that one. And the answer is sort of. The species tend to flower when they flower, but we're growing about 10 species this season. So we've got pretty much a 9-month flowering period with the genetics we've got coming up for this season. So we can start flowering plants in about June, July, which is no good down here, but if you're up in Queensland, that could be good. Right through till about March, April. And you'll see as we go through, most of those will come up. There's a little section at the end where we've got some questions. I'll probably answer most of the questions as we're going through. So this is the local ones for around this area. I've actually left one off because I didn't think Leongatha was that close to the coast, but it actually is. I should have tweaked. Coastal tea tree, Leptospermam latigatum, joins the heath tea tree. It's got 0 DHA, which is really sad for Australia because we've got a lot of that tea tree. But unfortunately, there's no DHA, so no matter what you do, that honey is never going to have any MGO. It's just like any other honey. Well, I think the scientists are working on something like that at the moment, but they won't tell me about it.
Have you done any work on the Rotunда folio?
It's active. Yeah.
Because that's one of the ones I've been working on.
Okay. Yep. Yeah, it is an active species. I'm not sure. I think it sort of fits in around about the continental level, about that 3,000 on average. But there's so much variation between species. It's huge. I've tested Scoparium from 500 up to 15,000. So it's really, really hard to. It is an active species, and they're always going to be active, but it's the level where it affects. So if you go around this area and you grab one of the local tea trees and it's prickly, right? You go, ouch. It's probably continentalia. Okay, so that's a prickly tea tree. Grows about 3 metres. The average DHA in Victoria is about 2,800. I haven't found any that high yet. They've all been lower than that. So we're not growing that one this year, but that's one of the local species. The woolly tea tree has got a lot of potential. If you go out, and you'll find this one in the swampy, low-lying areas. It likes a wet area. It's got grey foliage, and it's got really soft leaves. And that one's, the average for the species is about 5,000 DHA in Victoria. I think it's a little bit lower in New South Wales, so there's regional provinces that are better than others. And I'll go on to the test results we've got for these that are growing this year. Now there is actually Leptospermam in South Gippsland as well. It doesn't come up on your maps because not many people know about it, but I found it just out of Leongatha, down near Wonthaggi, in between Leongatha and Inverloch. So there's a few little spots. It's not widespread, it's just the odd little plant here and there. So yeah, Manuka is actually local to this area as well. Now the average DHA for Manuka is about 2,000 DHA, which is about equivalent to what the New Zealanders started off with as well. Leptospermam grandiflorum is probably not around here. Closest you'll probably get to that species is either Walhalla or Mount Borwell. I saw some last weekend when I was out hiking, much to my kids' disgust. And yeah, that one's a bit over 2,300 as well. But it's going to, as for a plantation species, we're not really looking at that one because it grows right up on high mountains, so it's going to have some pretty specialised cultivation requirements as well. Now, there's another one there that's actually not a leptospermum. It's Kunzia ericoides. It's called Bergen. A lot of people do call it Manuka. but it used to be a lepto, but they've got to separate it out. It's also got 0 DHA in it. So the Kiwis call that one Kanuka. So you might have heard of Kanuka honey. That comes from Kunji Erebodis as well. I'm not sure if that one drifted over from Australia as well or not, but if you go sort of east of Maui, get up into Yarra, there's just hundreds and hundreds of acres of that one. It's all over the place. And those DHA levels are courtesy of the Sunshine Coast. So this year, these are in flowering water. We're growing about 10 species. All the starters on the little pamphlets we've got up here at the moment, so they feel like you're going to miss out if you can't remember them all. So we're starting off with the pink polygallifolium, or jellybush. It's only a low one. Flowers from about July to September, might be a little bit earlier. DHAs on that plant was about 10,500. And the MGO is sort of like an indicator at the moment. The honey you get won't come out at that level because you're going to get dilution factors from other sources. So if half the nectar came from other sources, you'd expect that the MGO from those plants would be up to 700 thereabouts-ish. Next one is the cardboard tea tree. This one's been grown in gardens forever. It's actually a Queensland native. We tested the one in our garden that came up at almost 1,000 MGO, which is pretty handy. We get snow where we are every now and again. Not very often, thankfully. So even though it's a tropical species, it still handles the conditions down here very well. It's quite an early flower. We found a pink cultivar of the woolly tea tree. So it's a garden variety. It tested about 11,000 DHA, so that's pretty high. Flowers September, October. You roll on to the species, which is the white one. That kicks in about a month later. So if you've got a wet spot, you could probably plant those two species and have about a 3-month flowering period from a really wet, boggy spot where cattle get bogged. The highest we found with the woolly tea tree is about 8,500, which is about double the species average. Jellybush, this is the one that is making a lot of interest, especially up in the north coast of New South Wales, southern Queensland. It flowers and grows down here quite well. I've seen them on the edge of Warren. November, December tends to be about the time around here. The highest we've found for that one is DHA 18,000, which is really, really high. If you convert it over, it's about 2,500 MGO. So that's pretty potent sort of honey. Even if you get half of that, you're still happy with 1,000 MGO honey, I reckon. That'll do all right. The highest testing species on average in the country is second highest actually, is Leptospermam waddii. So out of 80 odd species in the country, waddii has come up number 2. The average is about that 14,000 to 15,000, and that's a northern New South Wales, southern Queensland one. I'm not sure how it's going to go down here. It's going to be a trial type situation with that one, but really, really high active honey, and I reckon it's going to flower around about the same time as jellybush. Manuka flowers about the same time as the jelly and the other one. The highest we've found around this area is about 6,000 DHA. That one's 14,000, so we're looking forward to that one growing up a bit and having babies. And then we can be selling 14,000 DHA plants up there at the moment in a couple of years' time. But at the moment, around about that 6,000 DHA. Brachyandrum is a really, really dry tolerant species. It grows up in northern Queensland and it kicks over in the other side of the divide. So very few tea tree species actually go on that western side of the divide in Australia. Most of them hung along the coast, unless there's some really, really wet areas. This one goes out in that really dry country. And I was testing plants in southern Queensland this year in December. All the jellybush were bone dry in this area, and this guy was still weeping nectar out of its flowers, and there was bees all over it. So I think it's going to have it's probably because it's a tree. It's a taller one. It grows about 5 to 6 metres. So it might have a deeper root system than the shrubby ones. That might be why it's still producing nectar when the others are giving up. We found that one at about 11,000 DHA, so it's pretty high. I don't think anyone else is looking at that species either. Leptospermam, I've actually tested some of this in Leongatha. I was over here a few weeks ago and I was here in flower. Haven't got the test results back. I'm hoping they're higher than that one, because that one's up in Sydney. So I've got to go a long way to get some more seed of that one. That's about 10,000 DHA. That one will flower January, February. So that one in Gippsland could actually be a really, really good species to have some after Christmas honey when there's not much else going on, unless you want some messmate or some coastal madder or something like that. Now the latest flowering species in the country is Leptospermam lipsidii. It's also called lemon-scented tea tree, which is why we talk in botanical names generally. It's only a low grower, it's got pink flowers, and it flowers February, March. It might even be a little bit later down this far south. So that gives us about a 9-month spread of flowering from the species that we've got lined up for this season. Okay, some of the key factors for success for making all this work. First of all, the plants have got to be genetically active, so they've got to have high levels of DHA in the nectar. If you haven't got the high levels genetically, there's no way you're going to end up with it in your honey. Nectar yield is also an important factor. So if they've only got 2 flowers on a bush, but they're really nice flowers, you're not going to get a big yield of nectar. So you want plants that is absolutely covering themselves in flowers. So that the more nectar, the more honey. Plant density, I'll touch on that one in a sec. But importantly, I'll touch on that with the nectar gap as well. It's really, really important. They've got to be if you're going to produce medical grade honey, they need to be the principal source of nectar that the bees are foraging on at the time. So if you've got a massive eucalypt flowering happening a K down the road, and you've got your leptospermam happening over there as well, the bees are going to go where bees want to go. They'll go and get a heap from the gums and a heap from the tea tree, and you'll end up with a diluted product. So you really want to try to avoid those major flowerings that you know are going to be year on year, although the gums are only every 3 or 4 years. But yeah, it really needs to be that filling that window where there's not much else going on in the area. With planting densities, always like to start at the end. What's your end goal? So if you want, just planting out some windbreaks, you might want some stock shelter for your stock. If you're going to use tea tree only, about 2 metres apart, thereabouts, that way they lock in nicely. Even if you're doing multi-rows, keep it about that density. With your mixed species, if you're going to plant eucalypts, so you want some shade as well. First of all, make sure the gum tree is not going to flower at the same time as your tea tree, because that'll defeat the purpose as far as the honey production goes. And plant them about 3 metres apart. If you really want to and you're on good soil, which you guys are down here, you could probably put that lepto row about 2 metres apart, but keep the utes at about 3 metres. In a straight plantation setup, if you're going to be looking to grazing sheep or anything like that underneath later on, because you might want to have a multi-purpose plantation, don't leave the sheep in there all the time, because they will, if they get a bit tight for tucker, they'll start browsing and eating your bushes. So it's more of a rotational setup. Put them in, put them out, put them in, put them out. And you put them about 5 or 6 metres apart, so still eating some grass and some forage and the likes of those. And the lemon-scented tea tree and probably even the brachyandrum are good little species, but in that respect, after Christmas flowering, so all the clover and the capeweed's gone, and you can still graze and get some honey off them. If you're going to plant out a particular site for leptospermam and honey production solely, so you might have a really angry looking hill, you're thinking, I don't want to climb up that anymore and chase cows because it's a piece of hard work. I might plant out with tea trees. Stick them about 3 metres apart across the hectare, so 3 metres and then go down 3 metres. That way, the plants, when they're mature, they're going to be just touching each other. So you don't want them jammed up so tight that all their leaves are falling in amongst each other and competing against each other. You want them big, strong plants with big root systems so that you get a massive canopy of flowers all over the bush, so you maximise their flower production. If you stick them too close, you're going to end up with almost like a totem top of flowers after a few years, whereas all the flowers will just be on top and all those bottom branches will drop off because they won't get as much light in there. So yeah, that's actually the density they use for agroforestry, 1150 plants per metre as well. So the reason they want the closeness is to send them straight up. With the leptos, we don't want them to go straight up, we want them to push out. And we're dealing with shrubs and seed trees. No. Okay, we're back in action. It's going to update itself again. Okay, so when you spin out your honey, so you've got your spinner and you're spinning, it can take 12 to 18 months for the DHA to be totally converted over to MGO. So you don't spin your honey out put it in your jar and sell it straight away with high MGO figures, but you can get it tested. You send it up to Queensland, to the Sunshine Coast. That's the only lab in Australia that's actually doing it at the moment. And they will send you back some data with the expected MGO at the end of the maturation period. But unfortunately, it's not a spin and sell. It's a bit of a time lapse type product. And if you've got plenty of it, you put it in an IVC or whatever you've got and store it in a big container. I'm not sure if anyone's tried doing it in little jars, whether it's got to mix properly or you get different readings or something like that. Yeah, but it does take 12 to 18 months. Now, I think your chap was talking about honey. Yeah, the tea tree honey being sticky in those. It could be why jellybush is called jellybush, because in some cases it's actually a bit more gelatinous rather than honey-like. They can be difficult to extract. The Kiwis have little machines that have little spikes, and they spike each individual cell, and they do it 3 or 4 times, and then it spins out a fair bit easier. That helps. But if you've got a flow hive, and you're looking to produce medical type honey, it actually gets stuck in the cells and won't flow. So when you do your ratchet mechanism and try to offset the different cells, it just stays there and doesn't move. So that can be an issue. But if you haven't got a couple of dozen plants in the garden or whatever, don't worry about it, it won't be that much. Now yield-wise, Kiwis, they're maxed at about 40 kilos per hive on the Manuka. Generally it's a little bit lower than that, sort of between 20 and 30. Depending on how many hives they're stacking on to those sites these days too. 1 to 2 hives is one hive per hectare is what they stock in the wild. I haven't spoken to anyone who's willing to tell me what they stock in Australia. There's lots of secrecy and hush-hush about this stuff. But if we work on the New Zealand data, 1 hive per hectare on a wild site, I reckon with some of our species, just anecdotally, I've seen Scoparium with nectar flow. And I've seen some of the other species, like the Petersonii, the Brachyandrum, a lot more, and even Lanigerum, the woolly tea tree, really, really high nectar levels. So the stocking rates might be a bit higher than that on a plantation setup with those species, but that's just anecdotally me looking at plants and thinking how they relate to the Scoparium as the baseline. So that's still to be found out. This is all pretty new in Australia still. Now, someone was talking about heating up the honey earlier on to make it flow better. Now there's a little linchpin with the DHA if you get it above, I think it's about 40 or 50 degrees, it starts denaturing, so it starts decomposing. So if you want to get that really sticky honey and you think I'm just going to heat it up and hit it in the back of the car and spin it when it comes out, you're probably going to knock out half your DHA, so you're going to end up with a lower testing honey. And the New Zealand standards for their Manuka is actually, they've got a genetic test or marker where they can actually test to find out whether the honey's been heated up or not. And if it has, there's levels for export where if that mark is exceeded, no matter what your MGO levels are, that goes back to food grade honey.
Do you think that electric capping knife is the amount of heat that produces will that affect it?
I wouldn't think so, because it's only on the very tip and it's so quick. Yeah, so it's still got to decap it. And I've seen you can look up on YouTube, if you look up Manuka honey extraction, you'll see all these nice little pictures and frames going up and down and getting chopped and spun out and all that kind of stuff. But because it's so fast, it's not a sustained heating, so the honey inside will cool it down quicker, so I don't think it affects it. Okay, oh, my kids are looking a bit funny. If you're looking to plant tea trees, site preparation is important. Basically treat them like any other plant. So if you've ever done some revegetation projects on your property where you're planting gums and wattles and all the rest of it, tea trees are sometimes in that mix. Treat them the same. So time of planting, the best time to plant is when you don't want to plant when it's cold and wet and miserable, and it's June, July, August. That's probably about the best time in Gippsland. The reason for that is the moisture levels are so good that you won't have to water them. This summer might be testing out some that were planted earlier on because it hasn't rained for about 6 weeks. But yeah, generally speaking, they'll get through a regular Gippsland summer, never having been watered. So, but that's all about the timing. If you're planting in October, the roots won't have a chance to go down far enough to tap into that subsoil moisture. Weed control is pretty important. So they're only little seedlings when they start off, and they've only got little root systems. Grasses, especially in Gippsland, are really, really vigorous. They've got big root systems and they grow really, really fast. Either scalp We're actually mucking around at the moment with a organically certified herbicide, which is a bit of a knockdown. It's called Slasher. So we're just seeing if that one works or not. I don't think it's going to be quite as good as Roundup, but if you're a bit worried about glyphosate ending back up in the hive, that's a good thing. Yeah, so we're mucking around with that one as well, but weed control is a pretty important one. Mulching as well will help keep moisture in and weeds out down the track. So a little bit of mulch, probably you don't want to do 10,000 of them, but if you do 30 or 40, a bit of mulch around each one will help keep that weed burden away from the plants and give them a bit better start. Watch out for rabbits, wombats, wallabies. When plants come from the nursery, they're generally pretty well fed to get them nice and fresh and strong root systems. They've also got high sugar levels in their leaves and makes them a bit more palatable to browsing. If you've got rabbits, you'll find that plants will generally just be dug up and chucked on the side of the ground. If you've got wombats, they'll just rip them up and chuck them aside and probably defecate in that spot just to let you know they've been there. If you've got wallabies, they will graze the plant down and there'll be nothing left. If you've got hares, they will snip it off, leave the plant next to it and walk off to the next one and snip that one off as well. So I actually had a mate that did about 500 trees years ago, had some hares cut. He didn't guard them that night. It's up in East Gippsland. Came back next morning, 400 of them had just been gone. So yeah, guarding, especially for hares and rabbits, is if you've got those issues, I'd get rid of your rabbits or put some guards around them. Watering, if it's a really tough summer, you might want to top them up in that first summertime, right about now, give them a little drink if you need to, just to get them through. Now, fertiliser-wise, tea trees are fairly robust and don't have phosphorus sensitivities. So it's always sort of thought that Australian natives are sensitive to phosphorus, and if you get really, really excited and give them too much, they are. But the main ones that are the Hakeas and the Grevillea species, the Protea family. So these are related to gum trees, they're in the same family, bottle brushes. They don't have that same level of phosphorus sensitivity. So we grow all these plants with just a regular osmocote fertiliser. The phosphorus level is about 10%, so it's pretty high. No fertiliser sensitivities there whatsoever, just don't go overboard. Okay, some other things to think about. From the time you plant them as a plant, it generally takes about 3 or 4 years from planting before they start flowering. So don't go out the week after and expect your bees to be foraging on the plants. It takes 3 to 4 years. Saying that, on that site in the previous photo, there was some woolly tea tree in there. It was about that high after 2 years in flowering. So it does vary from site to site. But if you work on 3 to 4 years, you won't be disappointed. Peak production's after about year 6. So this is New Zealand sort of done. That's when the plants are really strong and they're pumping and they're getting heaps of flowers on. With the shrub species like the manuka and the jellybush, you're probably going to get about 30 years out of them. The lemon-scented tea tree and the brachyandrum, you'll probably get a lot more out of that. So the lemon-scented tea tree has been planted in Melbourne as a street tree for many, many years, especially out in the southeastern suburbs. And there's plants there that are 40, 50-year-old and still going along very, very nicely. But if you work on 30 years as a rough rule of thumb, so that's a fair return. So because you're getting honey pretty much every year, if you get a drought at the time of flowering, the plants can actually shut down and not produce nectar. But most years in Gippsland, I think you'd be pretty hard up to get that. You should get at least some return every year. Make sure the species is suitable for the site. So if you've got a really dry site, that's sort of more aimed at the damper ones, so the woolly tea trees and the Leptospermam, they need damp climates. Don't plant them on the side of the hill where it's never going to get any moisture. Soil types, most tea trees will handle coastal conditions pretty well. They'll handle most soils. They can handle salt spray, so they can be a full coastal exposure plant, even some of the other species that don't naturally live on the coast. But they don't like salt from underneath. Probably not much of a problem around this area, but if you go further east, where you do have some salinity from underneath in the groundwater, that can kill them pretty quick. The more sun you can give a plant, the more flowers you're going to get. So I suppose the perfect position is either an east, north or west facing slope, or if you're flat, it doesn't really matter. But on the south side of the slope, where you're not going to get as much sunshine, the plants are not going to be as big and robust, and you're not going to get as many flowers, so you're going to decrease your productivity in that respect. So just keep that in mind as well. Plants like us, they like a bit of sun. Now, if you're planting tea trees in an urban area, so say we're going to plant out the yard around here, we're going to stick about 20 plants out in the yard. Most of you will know that bees have got a pretty big radius where they will forage from. So it might be 1 kilometre when things are good, stretching up to about 3 k's when things are pretty tough. So if you think about your 20 or 30 plants in your backyard that you're planting out, and for your hive, the chances of getting a really high grade honey is basically zero, because the bees are going to be up out of your yard and going into your neighbour 5 streets down to get what's going on down there as well. So by the time your bees have foraged for a 1 kilometre radius, which is probably most of Leongatha, I'd imagine, the dilution factor is going to be so high, you're not going to get a really high medical grade honey. You'll still get some in there, but it's not going to be the top-notch, valuable stuff that you're really looking for. So just keep that in mind in a town. As far as pests and diseases go, these guys are fairly hardy. They do get a little wedding caterpillar from time to time, which just sets up a little home. It's only about 5 or 6 millimetres long. It's thinner than a pencil lead, but it makes what looks like a spider web. So if you've seen a tea tree in your garden, especially the little dwarf ones, they tend to be more prone to it. You'll think, oh, there's spiders in the plant. There's actually a little caterpillar in there, but it doesn't tend to kill the plant or cause too much damage to it. There is another one called sooty mould, and if you plant them in a really dark, damp sort of area where there's not much ventilation, or you plant them really, really close where there's not much ventilation, they can get a bit of blackness down the stems. It slows them down a bit, but it's not going to kill them. So on the whole, they're pretty robust. There's another one called myrtle rust as well, which is endemic in Australia, but it doesn't seem to have, from where I've been, affected any leptos too much. They seem to be strong enough to be able to repel that fungus. Now, tea trees, as I mentioned earlier on, are a species that responds to fire. So if you're looking to plant a lot of tea tree on your place, just bear in mind that one day a fire does happen. You want to make sure that your tea tree plantation is far enough away from your house and your infrastructure that it's not going to cause you issues. And same for your neighbour's infrastructure, don't plant it right next to their house because that would be just as bad. So just keep that in the back of your mind. They are related to the gum tree. They have got oils in their leaf which are a bit more volatile, I suppose, when we're exposed to fire. So just keep that in the back of your mind when you're planting a leptospermam plantation. Right, a couple of tips. When you put your bees on here and you've got your trees and they're all flying away and they're flowering, make sure you've got your hives nice and strong. So get your best hives onto those, onto the plantation to get as much honey out as you can. Use drawn out frames or stickies if you like, so that the bees don't have to draw out the foundation to get the cells formed, because that takes time and it takes energy. Each individual species will probably flower about 8 to 10 weeks, so if you lose 3 or 4 weeks of that just drawing out the frames, you've lost half your production already. The other thing is make sure the frames are empty as well, that you put in there. So you don't want to put in, just say we just come off some gum trees somewhere and they're half full, I'll just put them in there and the leptos. Instantly, as time you do that, you've already diluted the honey produced by half. So make sure they're drawn out and they're empty frames. I'm going to have empty in there when I get home. Swarm control. A lot of these plants flower at October, November, December period. That's prime swarming season. Re-queen before winter if you need to make sure half your workforce doesn't nick off when you want them staying home collecting honey. I'm not a beekeeping expert, but I'm sort of the opinion if you've got a young queen in a hive before spring, there's less chances of it swarming. Pollen-wise, tea trees are a poor source of pollen, but they are a good source of nectar. So they're not quite as good as a gum tree, but they're still reasonable. So if you're looking to have plants on tea tree for quite a while, the hives can actually run down as they're breeding up of their pollen reserves. Now there's a couple of species of wattle which don't produce nectar, but do produce pollen. So it might be in a plantation and we plant a few wattles around of those species to act as a pollen source for the bees while they're on the tea tree. If you want to produce, you can actually get the oil out of the leaves as well and produce a manuka oil. The only problem is if the tea trees flower on last year's wood. So the leaves they're growing now is what they'll be flowering on next year. So if you're going to prune the plants really, really hard, you're going to knock off next year's flowers. So it's either one or the other. You're either going to go for the manuka oil, which is probably a lower grade product, or go for the flowers and the honey. So you can prune them as much as you want when they're little plants, and all our plants get structurally pruned as they're growing, so we get those lateral shoots going out and get them nice and thick. But once they start flowering, just a light pruning, and that's about all, otherwise you're going to lose flower production. Now, there's probably potential for people to share the profits on a property. If they don't want bees, but they've got a couple of acres on a steep hill, like the one in the previous slide, and they might be able to come to an arrangement where you can put your bees on there for a while the leptos are flowering. It's just something that's worked pretty well in New Zealand. We're almost there. Right, a couple of myths. The soil type will affect the bioactivity of the plants. So the DHA levels are pretty much locked in to the genetics of the plant. So wherever you take that plant, that's going to be a really, really high active plant. If you get a coastal tea tree, no matter where you plant it, it's going to have nothing. Okay, so the soil type doesn't affect the activity of the flowers. It does, however, affect the production of the plant. So if the plant is poorly suited to that site, you're not going to get as much nectar production. Flower colour has absolutely no correlation whatsoever to activity. So there was a chap running around a couple of years ago saying that the red flowered ones were the best and we had to go for red flowers because that's what the go was. I've tested red ones and they came back at next to zero. But yeah, so the nice white ones have just got as much activity, if not more, than the coloured ones. So there's really no correlation between the two. And as I mentioned earlier, not all plants are the same species are created equal. So some plants, like this chap, is a really, really good one, and the other ones at home might have a quarter of the DHA level. So the only way you can actually tell whether a plant's going to be a high active plant is by getting it tested. There's one more for any other questions. Economics wise, you probably need about a hectare if you're going to have a bit of a go at it for a honey production type of thing, and aim for that species to fill that nectar gap. If you're direct selling the honey, if you couldn't get 25 bucks for a 250 gram jar, I'd be surprised. That's about 100 bucks a kilo. If you're selling to packers, it generally starts at about 20 bucks a kilo, going up to about 100 bucks a kilo, depending on the MGO levels. So the potential returns are quite considerable. And with yields of between 20 and 40 kilos of hive, stocked at 2 hives per hectare when mature, it adds up to a couple of bucks. Right, where are we going? We're looking to plant a couple of thousand on our place this year. We're also doing more nectar testing to try to find more plants like that one. We're also looking for more species. We've found 10 so far. I'm not sure, Rotundifolium, someone mentioned earlier on. Might be able to find some good cultivars of that one. We do a lot of this talking to beekeepers and the like. I think I've spoken to about 950 people on this topic so far. The aim was to get to 1,000. I think I'll get that quite easily by June. That was the goal. We're looking to produce about 50,000 leptos this year. We've had a pretty good germination rate, so that number might be a little bit higher. And the other thing we're looking at is year-round nutrition for bees. So if someone wants a fixed hive, they've got an acre or something like that, and they want to find a way to feed their bees all year round, what species can we plant at different times a year to keep the bees fed all year round? But my mind is so caught up in this one at the moment, I haven't got to that stage. That's coming. Any questions?
And just to interject, given that we're running a bit late, I suggest we keep it to say 2 or 3 questions, after which people can charge up here and mob Rob and have a look at all of the plants and things he's got.
Oh, so those plants are for sale too, by the way, if you want to buy them.
He's got some jellybush there.
There's some jellybush there, some manuka, some woolies and some prickles as well.
So 2 or 3 questions?
Yep.
I'm just wondering, with the enormous quantities of NGO in some of those honeys, are there any problems with ingesting honey with very large NGO numbers?
Yep. When you've got honey that's got NGO levels like that, that's aimed at medical use. So you'd be nuts to be eating $100 a kilo honey. The stuff that's getting exported all over the world, especially to Asia, for food type eating, is less than 300 MGO. And if you go to Safeway or Coles and look at the labels, it's probably got 30 MGO. Right, so really, really low stuff. Once you get about 400 MGO, you don't want to be shoving it down your throat. You want to be selling it to the medical side of things. But
would it hurt you though?
I don't think it would. You can try it. I've actually never had that question before, but I don't think it would, because the MGO levels are in parts per million. So when you've got 1,000 MGO honey, that's 1,000 parts per million, so that's 1 in 1,000.
Have you tasted it? Is it
Yeah.
tasty?
I don't mind it. Some people don't like it. That's horses for courses, I suppose. The Asians really, really like it. That's why it's in Tullamarine Airport, selling for $70 for 250 grams. Because they're picking that jar up and taking it home. They like it.
Are there other plants that produce these sorts of properties, such as rosemary or lavender or some other plants that have this sort of resonant
The medical properties.
oil? Yes.
Yep. The only plants I'm aware of that can match the manuka are a few eucalypts, and I think there's a melaleuca. I'm not sure which one it is. But they don't have MGO. They've got really, really high peroxide levels in the honey. And you'll see another label on or another little sticker on a jar, and it says TA, which is total activity. And some of those can be 30 plus, really, really high. Matches anything that the leptos are producing. So the Jarrah honey is one that's come up as probably the highest testing one. But I think spotted gum is another one that's got fairly high peroxide levels. The only problem with spotted gum in this area is it flowers in the middle of winter when our bees are sleepy, unless you've got a nice day. So you want to be Sydney or north to produce that type of honey. But as far as I'm aware, there's a handful of gums, and there's not many, that also produce really, really high peroxide levels that has the same effect on the golden staph as the MGO does from the tea tree.